أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today we're completing the 10th juz of the Qur'an in Surah At-Tawba, verses 87 to 93. Surah At-Tawba, verses 87 to 93, page number 201. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رضوا بأن يكونوا مع الخوالف وطبع على قلوبهم فهم لا يفقهون لكن الرسول والذين آمنوا معه جاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم وأولئك لهم الخيرات وأولئك هم المفلحون أعد الله لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ذلك الفوز العظيم وجاء المعذرون من الأعراب ليؤذن لهم وقعد الذين كذبوا الله ورسوله سيصيب الذين كفروا منهم عذاب أليم ليس على الضعفاء ولا على المرضى ولا على الذين لا يجدون ما ينفقون حرج إذا نصحوا لله ورسوله ما على المحسنين من سبيل والله غفور رحيم ولا على الذين إذا ما أتوك لتحملهم قلت لا أجد ما أحملكم عليه تولوا وأعينهم تفيض من الدمع حزنا ألا يجدوا ما ينفقون إنما السبيل على الذين يستأذنونك وهم أغنياء رضوا بأن يكونوا مع الخوالف وطبع الله على قلوبهم فهم لا يعلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. As we mentioned last week, that when the Prophet of Allah was building the society in Medina, there was a period of time for building strength, for building faith, and then there was a period of time where they had to struggle, they had to do jihad. And when the time came to do jihad, there were two groups of people, even amongst the believers as well. One group of people that joined the Prophet of Allah. The Qur'an says, ma'ahu, they were with him. And there was a second group who turned away from the Prophet of Allah, who made an excuse for why they could not be with the Prophet of Allah. Last week we read some verses, and the last few weeks we've been reading some verses about those people who turned away from supporting the Holy Prophet. Today Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the first few verses that we recited, talks about those people who supported the Holy Prophet. And more importantly, it talks about their characteristics. What sort of attributes did they have when they heard that they were supposed to engage in a struggle? So we come to the second verse that we recited today. لَكِنِ الرَّسُولُ. When these verses of the Qur'an are revealed and the believers are told to go out of the city, لَكِنِ الرَّسُولُ. But the Messenger of God, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And those who believe. Well, those who believe were of two types. There were those who were supporting the Prophet and those who were not. Which ones is this verse talking about? مَعَهُ. Those who were with him. جَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ. They struggled. They struggled with what? They struggled with their wealth and they struggled with their lives as well. Meaning what? Meaning that they risked their wealth and they risked their lives as well. Why is God making a point of this? Mentioning both wealth and life. Because in the context of what we are reciting, you remember that there were some people who came to the Holy Prophet and they said, Ya Rasulullah, we cannot come to the battlefield. Our lives are too dear to us, but we'll give our wealth to you. These people are not like that. Whatever they have, whatever the Prophet asks for, they're willing to give. In the context of today's society, it means that we're willing to give whatever is dear to us for the sake of Islam and the sake of the community and the sake of the community of the 12th Imam. It could be today for somebody, his time is very dear to him. His skills are very dear to him. Well, giving that up for the sake of building values, that is also a way of doing jihad. Okay? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ. And for them, this group of people is the khayrat. For those who would have learned a little bit of Arabic, if you look at the sentence structure, أُولَٰئِكَ, these are the people, لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ. The khayrat, meaning the good things, are for them. It implies a type of exclusivity, meaning that khayrat, goodness, is only for these people. It teaches us a very important message for our own community. If we want our community to grow, we want our community to have good values, it will not be enough for us just to build faith. Along with building faith, we also have to struggle. We also have to build values. We'll have to do some things which are difficult for us. We're going to have to risk some things as well. Because this verse says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَجَاهَدُوا. And they also did jihad. لَيْكَ لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And these are the people who are going to be the successful ones. Now, how are they going to be successful? Well, the verse says al-khayrat. What type of goodness? Sometimes when alif lam comes before a word in Arabic, it implies a definite article. For example, if I say kitab, it means what? Book. Al-kitab means what? The particular book. Now, in the Arabic language, sometimes alif lam is used for istighraq. Istighraq implying all, every, right? For example, wal asr, by the time, innal al-insana, no particular man, all of mankind. And for them is all of goodness, the goodness of this world and the goodness of the hereafter. Now, in terms of the goodness of this world, it was understood by them that if they did jihad, they'd be building their community, they'd acquire spoils of war, so on and so forth. What about the goodness of the hereafter? So God explains in the next verse, أَعَدَّ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ. God has prepared for them. Now, in the Arabic language, أَعَدَّ comes from the word i'dad. I'dad means to prepare. Sometimes God says in the Qur'an, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Wa'ada means to promise. Ahsan. God promises those who believe. In this verse of the Qur'an, Allama Tabatabai points out that Allah doesn't say that He promises Jannah for them. God says we have prepared Jannah for them, but we haven't yet promised it to them. So He asks over there, why? Why in other verses of the Qur'an, God has said that we promised Jannah for them, but in this verse of the Qur'an, He's only said, we have prepared Jannah for them. He says that in this verse of the Qur'an, perhaps at that time, God was talking about a particular group of people. Which group of people? Those who went for the battle of Tabuk with the Prophet of Allah, did not make any excuses, and then they came back. Because it's talking about a particular group of people, God will never say God is promising Jannah to them, because it's not known. Later on in life, they may turn away from the path of Islam. There is no guarantee there. When God talks about the believers in general, God says yes. As for those who are believers, meaning those who die in the state of Iman, God has promised Jannah for them. أَعَدَّ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ, God has prepared for them Jannatin, gardens, تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ, under which rivers flow, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا, they will stay in there for a long time. ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ, that is the greatest victory. Meaning what? Meaning that in the life of this world, the believers in that time will go from battle to battle, struggle to struggle, victory to victory. Sometimes their victory will be emphatic, sometimes their victories will be limited. And when you finish one struggle, don't think the struggles are over. When one struggle finishes, the next struggle comes. So what is the final victory? And what is the greatest victory? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you finally enter Jannah, then that is the greatest victory. وَجَاءَ الْمُعَذِّرُونَ مِنَ الْأَعْرَابِ لِيُؤْذَنَ لَهُمْ. Now, a group of people had come to the Holy Prophet, and they had asked from the beginning to be excused from going to Tabuk. And they had a good reason, as we're going to talk about it in the next few verses. And what happened during that time is when the Prophet of Allah came back to Medina, and he's reprimanding those who did not come out of Medina, and they had no excuse for not coming out of Medina. What normally happens sometimes in a community or even in a family, if somebody's done something wrong and you reprimand them, the first thing a child might say, for example, is to say that, but he also did it, or he didn't do it. You go to a madrasa class, right? If somebody hasn't done their homework, or somebody is outside of class, for example, they're not supposed to be outside of class. The moment you tell them that, look, you're not supposed to be outside of class, instead of recognizing that, okay, I have broken the law, I've broken some ethics, I shouldn't have done it, the first response that comes back is, but they were outside as well, right? Now, one day a person came to one of the companions of Imam Ali, and he said to him that, I look at your history, you don't have an outstanding history. I look at your lineage, you don't have an outstanding lineage. In fact, according to the narration I read, he even told him that I look at your physique and you're not outstanding in your physique either, right? Then how come you've become the leader of the community instead of others, right? What is outstanding in you that they don't have, that you became the leader of your tribe and they didn't become the leader of the tribe? So he looked at him and he said, I don't look into your affairs the way you look into my affairs. I don't concern myself with your problems the way you are concerning yourself right now with my problems and my issues. Meaning what? Meaning those things which are within my circle of influence, which are important to me, I deal with them. Those things which are not important to me, or maybe important to you, I don't deal with them. One of the things that we always ought to do is focus more on our lives than we focus on the lives of others. If they did something wrong, it doesn't make it right for us, okay? So over here they were told, well, you stayed back. They said, well, these people stayed back as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers that now. He tells them, وَجَاءَ الْمُعَذِّرُونَ مِنَ الْأَعْرَابِ. There were some people amongst the Bedouins, some have said this was the tribe of Bani Ghafar, that they were excused from coming to Tabuk. They came to the Holy Prophet, even though they were told that you have been excused. They still came to the Holy Prophet and they said, Ya Rasulullah, because of this reason we ask you to excuse us. It was known that, for example, maybe some people were old, some people were sick. They were not supposed to come with the Prophet of Allah, but they still came to the Holy Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, we have got this excuse. Right? In the month of Ramadan, for example, sometimes a person knows that they're not going to be able to fast. They also know that they have an excuse. But still sometimes they'll come to Mawlana and say, Mawlana, it is because of this reason that I'm not able to fast. Right? They want to, but they can't. God says, well, they are different from those. وَقَعَدَ الَّذِينَ كَذَبُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. And those who belied the Prophet of Allah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they stayed behind. They sat down. سَيُصِيبُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. As for those who have disbelieved amongst them, there will be a painful punishment for them. So now the next question is, who is excused from coming? Who is excused from the struggle? And with what conditions are they excused? Okay. Now sometimes you have an excuse, but the question you want to ask yourself is, if I didn't have this excuse, would I still be involved? That's more important, right? We have to look into our hearts sometimes more than our actions. Our actions don't tell us the reality of our character. In the last few Thursday nights, we've been talking about the concept of riya, of showing off, right? And sometimes it's so hidden. Sometimes a person doesn't show off, but if he looks into his heart, he sees that he feels like showing off. He still desires that people should praise him. And even though he doesn't talk to anybody, even though he doesn't show it to anybody, when he looks into his heart, in his heart it says to him, I wish somebody knew about it. That's far hidden. You can't even see that. Right? Because sometimes you really have to take the pulse of our heart. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says over here, now who is excused? لَيْسَ عَلَى الضُّعَفَاءِ. Those who are weak, those who are disabled, those who are old, one, they are excused. وَلَا عَلَى الْمَرْضَى. Those who are sick, right? Those who are not healthy, they are excused. وَلَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَجِدُونَ مَا يُنْفِقُونَ. And neither those who do not have anything to spend. Now here, this could mean there were some people who had big families, they had to take care of them, there was nobody else to take care of them, they had nothing to give to them either, they had to work at that time, and some of them were excused by the Prophet of Allah. Harajun, there is no hardship upon them. If they didn't come to the battlefield, that is okay. إِذَا نَصَحُوا لِلَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. With one condition, as long as in their hearts they are sincere to the Prophet of Allah and they are sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what? Meaning that if these people, their desire to be with the Holy Prophet is so strong that if they did not have these excuses, they would have been with the Prophet of Allah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look at the next part, مَا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. They are considered to be amongst the muhsineen. They didn't do anything, but they're still considered to be amongst the muhsineen. Meaning what? Meaning that, let's say somebody really wants to fast in the month of Ramadan, and they're looking forward to it in the month of Ramadan. And come the month of Ramadan, they became sick. Come the month of Ramadan, they're very old. Sometimes some seniors come to me, I say, how was your day today? Not good. I say, what happened? I say, today they made me break my fast. The members of the family sometimes come to them and tell them that, you can't today, you haven't had your suhoor or whatever it is. It's not a good day today. So in their hearts, they really want to fast, but for whatever reason they couldn't fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the ajr for fasting that day in the month of Ramadan. They are considered to be amongst the muhsineen. Of course, it's not the case for a person who says that, they don't want to fast, and then come the month of Ramadan, they get an excuse, they become sick or whatever it is. They say, Alhamdulillah, khayra dunya wal akhirah. Right? The goodness of this world and the goodness of the hereafter as well. It doesn't work that way. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. You cannot reprimand these people. These are good people. وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Surely Allah is Ghafoor and Allah is Rahim. My question to you, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention these two attributes in this verse? They haven't committed a sin, so why Ghafoor? So they have committed a sin, and if they seek istighfar, God will forgive them. Yes, I mean that's for everybody though, right? Those who came to the battlefront, those who didn't come to the battlefront, those who struggled, those who didn't struggle. Allah is Ghafur for all of them. Why does God mention it for them? So, but you can only be a Ghafur. If you define Ghafur as forgiving, you can only be forgiving towards somebody who's committed a sin. Yes, so have they done something wrong? But the verse says, لَيْسَ عَلَى الضُّعَفَاءِ. Laysa means there is no haraj upon them. There is no expectation upon them. Anybody else? Yes, Aliyaza.
I think sometimes like we find our imams like doing istighfar. It's not like they've done something wrong, but it's because they feel that they have not given what was rightfully deserved for that action. Perhaps Allah is saying, yes, you may not have been able to perform, but I'm still forgiving.
Correct. So maybe they weren't able to come to the battlefield in this case, but they could have done something else. They could have supported the believer, or maybe in their hearts they could have a stronger desire to be there. And if they seek forgiveness, God will forgive them. Perhaps. These are some possibilities. Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi, he mentions in Tafsir Namune that Ghafara means to cover something. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to cover. You know, sometimes you feel a sense of shame, or feel a sense of indignity, or what are people going to say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to cover for them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to accept the excuse that they have given. That's what Ghafur means over here. Doesn't necessarily mean forgive. And Rahim means merciful. You know what merciful means? Merciful means, you know, a person sometimes has a very high expectation. Until you reach a particular standard, until you do so much, then he finally comes to accept you. Rahim means that person that even if you do a little bit, he may accept it from you. Okay? Even if you're not able to do everything, he may accept it from you. These people, even they did a little bit, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rahim. He's going to accept it from them. وَلَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ إِذَا مَا أَتَوْكَ لِتَحْمِلَهُمْ. A very special group over here. And it shows us one of the characteristics of the believers. And this is how we should be whenever we lose an opportunity to do goodness. Even though we didn't get the opportunity, the desire within us should be very strong. We should never say that, okay, alhamdulillah, you know, that opportunity didn't come up for me. No, it didn't come up for me. I missed out on it. I should have a strong desire for it. The fourth group of people who are excused, وَلَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ إِذَا مَا أَتَوْكَ. When they came to you, لِتَحْمِلَهُمْ. So that you would take them with you. قُلْتَ. You say to them, O Prophet of Allah. Some of them were not able to walk that long distance. They came to the Holy Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, we want to be with you, but give us a horse, give us a camel, give us a donkey. Let us share a horse with somebody. Let us share a camel with somebody. You say to them, لا أجد ما أحملكم عليه. I don't have anything on which I can carry you to the battlefront. There are no more horses. There are no more camels. تولوا. They turned away. But in what state did they turn away? وَأَعْيُنُهُمْ تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمِ. Their eyes were swelling up with tears. You know, sometimes when somebody is sad and, you know, it gets caught up in their throat, and it comes to a point where they're so sad but they're not crying yet, and the eyes swell up, you can see tears in the eyes. تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمِ. That's what it means. Their eyes had swelled up with tears. Why? حَزَنًا. Out of grief, out of sorrow. أَلَّا يَجِدُوا مَا يُنْفِقُونَ. That they don't have something by which they can go with the Prophet of Allah to the front. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes that very much from them. And I want us to do a very small reflection over here. That look at how Islam was built and this message of Islam was brought to us. There were people who were opposed to Islam from the outside, the mushrikeen of Mecca. There were people who were opposed to the Prophet of Allah from the inside, the hypocrites. And they weren't very supportive of the Holy Prophet. And then there was a group of people that was so dedicated that when they didn't get an opportunity to serve with the Holy Prophet, to put their lives on the line for the Holy Prophet, their eyes would swell up with tears. They would be sad in their hearts. And why were they doing that? That's the important question. What were they getting out of it? We have to ask ourselves. That they wanted to go with the Prophet of Allah. Were they trying to build their community? Well, their community was built. Medina was flourishing. Those who were in Mecca, they were flourishing as well. They had their businesses, they had their trades over there as well. So what were they trying to build? They were trying to build values. They were trying to build faith, an Islamic community. They were building the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were helping the Holy Prophet build the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that it spreads throughout humanity. I strongly believe that whenever we take steps as a community to promote values, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ, all the goodness comes down to us. Right? Whenever we have done that, I've given you this example before. When we built this center, our focus was on promoting values. A masjid to promote values. Husayniyah to promote faith and values. With classrooms upstairs for madrasa, classrooms upstairs for schools to promote values. Look at how much barakat came down. Today we're recognized in our societies. Right? Today look at the strength of the community. The other day I was reading Al-Amin newspaper and they were talking about some things which are happening outside and they're having press releases and they're having, for example, a particular civic institution joining them. They're making a big deal about it and they haven't done anything yet. And the very same thing that they're making a big deal about it, you wouldn't know, but our community is already involved in doing it. And providing a really good service to our society in doing that as well. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ. These khayrat came about because we were willing at that day, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, to sacrifice what we had to propagate the values of the deen. If we continue in that footsteps, if we continue in that path, even for 30 years down the road, for the next generation, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ. They will also have all of the goodness of the dunya and the akhirah. But if we only think of self-interest, we only think of, of ourselves, for our dunya, for our pleasure, for example, perhaps we may not get the hereafter, we may not get the world either. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says over here that these people, the people who are the Holy Prophet, they're desiring always to engage in acts of goodness, so do not reprimand them. إِنَّمَا السَّبِيلُ, if you wish to reprimand, عَلَى الَّذِينَ يَسْتَأْذِنُونَكَ, those who come and seek an excuse from you, وَهُمْ أَغْنِيَاء, whilst they are wealthy, they're able to finance themselves, they're able to reach the front, they have the strength to be able to do that, they have, the health to be able to do that. رَضُوا بِأَن يَكُونُوا مَعَ الْخَوَالِفِ, they're pleased in their hearts to stay with those who remain behind. Who are those who remain behind? The women, the children, the elderly, the sick. Right? وَطَبَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, so God has sealed their hearts. فَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, and therefore they do not understand and they do not know. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.